hearing, it came out that the Catholic Church, I guess I'm saying this right, received millions upon millions of dollars in all kinds of contracts. You're familiar with that, right?
Mr. Congressman, we don't get a handout.
Oh, I never said that.
We contract for services and we deliver and we bring to those services some moral convictions. And we shouldn't be at a disadvantage because we bring some moral convictions to the table. We also bring the generosity of the Catholic people, and we bring volunteers. When you contract with the church, you get a bang for your buck.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We now recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. McHenry, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a very simple and broad question for the whole panel. Very simple question. Is this ruling by HHS, do you view this as a issue of contraception and abortifacients, or an issue of religious freedom and conscience protections? Bishop Lori, and we'll certainly go down the row.
We view it as an issue of religious liberty. We view it, first of all, and primarily at the level of principle. It is a question of government reaching into the internal governance of religious bodies and making a requirement contrary to church teaching.
Thank you, sir. Reverend Harris.
Yes, we view it completely as a matter of religious freedom. We have never gone on record opposing all forms of birth control. We've only gone on record saying that we have moral objections to abortifacients, abortion-causing medications. So we are deeply concerned that this is a conscience issue. If we are forced in situations with our universities and other institutions to act in ways fundamentally contrary to our religious convictions, it has a disparaging effect on our institutions. It denudes us of the very faith that has driven us into those situations where we care for people in need.
Thank you. Dr. Mitchell.
It is completely a religious liberty issue for us, a freedom of conscience issue for us. There is an erosion of trust, I must say, among Baptists, or many Baptists, and the administration. And as we now are sort of experiencing the warm winds of an Arab Spring in the Middle East, we worry seriously. It's a solemn issue for us. We worry seriously that we may be entering the first chilling days of our winter of discontent.
Rabbi?
Yes, Congressman, this is absolutely an issue of religious freedom and only of religious freedom. If there are members of this committee or of Congress or of the executive branch who are concerned about access to contraception, they can seek through legislation or otherwise to ensure greater access to that. That can be debated in Congress. The members of Congress can vote on that, etc. And they're absolutely entitled and able to do that as members of Congress under the powers granted to them by the Constitution. What they cannot do, and that's why we're here today, is to achieve this end by trampling on the religious freedoms and the liberty of conscience of Americans. And they can't do that because that would be a violation of the Constitution that both members of Congress and of the executive branch have sworn to uphold and protect.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Mitchell.
Yes, this is clearly an issue of religious liberty, and it's one that I couldn't have imagined coming. And I think to see it as anything else is to completely miss the real importance of this issue. And so that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that question. A lot of folks want to pose this as a question of access to contraception. It is a deeper question of conscience protection and compelling an individual not simply to not do something, but compelling an individual to purchase something which they find morally objectionable, and using the force of the state to compel them to do that. There's an additional question. You know, there's a distinction within this rule about whether or not you're a religious institution, primarily serving people only of your faith, or are you open to others? So, Bishop Lori, there's a significant amount that the Catholic Church does, not just in Washington, D.C. or Connecticut, but across the country. So, why does the Catholic Church only serve Catholics?
No, it does not.
Why?
We serve.
And with all due respect, I'm Catholic, and for me to speak to a bishop like this is a little, little bit.
It is your immortal soul you're risking.
Well,
Room over here.
Thank you, Reverend. Thanks.
It all started when the Lord said, "Go and baptize all nations," and that kind of put us on a course of being out there. We serve people of all faiths and none, not because they're Catholic, but because we're Catholic and because our faith prompts us to do it. It flows from what we believe, how we worship, and how we are to live. And so we regard, for example, our Catholic charities as really an outgrowth of our discipleship of the Lord and our communion with one another in the Lord, not a side business.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I might note, just to be ecumenical, that Beth Israel provides Sunday food for Father Joe Carroll's food bank in San Diego, just to make sure that all days are covered. With that, we recognize the former chairman of the full committee, Mr. Towns, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would like to ask unanimous consent that I be allowed to submit testimony from the National Health Law Program for the record.
I'm reserving, you said testimony. Is it a written statement?
It's a written statement, yes.
Without objection, so ordered.
Let me begin by, and first of all, I must say that I am concerned, and I know it's been expressed earlier that we have before us 5 distinguished men and with no women. And I must admit that being an ordained minister myself, I must say, even in spite of all of that, I'm a little nervous over the fact that we have 5 men and no women. It sure would have been nice to at least have that kind of dialogue, because I really think that that's very, very important. And let me just, with that on the record, let me just move forward by saying it is my understanding, I guess Bishop Laurie, I'll go to you, that Georgetown University, very prestigious university here in our city, offers health insurance that covers contraception for its faculty, but not for its students. Is that correct?
I'm not familiar with the insurance plan of Georgetown University.
Well, let me ask you, if that's the case, do you believe Georgetown students should be offered the same health insurance benefit as its faculty? Do you believe that should happen?
Again, I don't think I'd be qualified to answer specifics about the kind of coverage provided to students and faculty.
Well, let's deal with generalities then.
Would the gentleman yield?
I'd be delighted to yield to the chairman.
Just briefly, we will have representatives of Catholic University, Abbey College, Baptist University, and Oklahoma Christian. So I think these are great questions, but we'll get it answered for you on the second panel.
Well, I think what I'm trying to do before the bishop departs, I'm trying to understand exactly what problems the bishop had with the administration's policy. That's what I'm really trying to understand. It's not clear to me.
Yes, well, the problems are at the level of principle and at the level of practicality. The principle is the government's reaching in and forcing us to do something. We might disagree inside of the church. We might have our problems inside of the church, but it's not for the government to weigh in and be the arbiter of those things. And secondly, many church entities, such as the Diocese of Bridgeport, which I can certainly speak about, they're self-insured. And so as a result, I am not only the employer, but also the insurer. And so certainly at the level of practicality, the new rule does nothing to help. And also there are religious insurers. There are individuals who have conscientious objections. and the rules do nothing for them. So we have problems on all those levels.
Right. Well, let me ask this then. What if a Catholic entity decides that it wants to obtain insurance for its employees from outside that covers contraceptives? Does that violate Catholic doctrine?
So if your question is, if a Catholic entity wishes or goes ahead and purchases coverage for contraception or an abortifacient,
Yes.
We would say it does, yes.
Anyone else, does it violate your doctrine? Very quickly, I'm running out of time.
Most specifically, only in the case of those drugs which specifically cause abortion.
Quickly.
And within the Southern Baptist Convention, we have a resolutions process in our denomination that has, in time after time after time, has passed resolutions against any abortifacient drugs.
My concern here, Congressman, is not what one particular Jewish organization might say about a particular prescription or procedure or whether their tenets are violated when they're forced to provide that. My concern is when Congress or the administration comes in and says, well, I see that there are some members of one faith who say this, some members of the other faith who say this, so we're going to unilaterally side with these people and force everyone, even over their objections, to violate their conscience. In general, a religious community and a religious organization should be free to define what the tenets of their faith are, and they should be listened to when they are told that a particular demand or mandate by the federal government violates those liberties.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say amen to the rabbi because I've never had the chance to do that before.
The gentleman's time has expired.
But could I get Dr. Mitchell's response?
Of course, the gentleman can answer if he'd like to.
Yes, the Southern Baptist Convention, that there's no one statement that speaks for all of us, but I think if you were to poll all the professors at our Southern Baptist seminaries, what you would find is that we stand solidly against abortion. We believe that it is contrary to Christian faith and practice.
You know, the reason I asked this question, being an ordained minister myself, I still feel that the woman's right to choose is something that we should just not ignore. And of course, as I indicated early on, it sure would be nice and make me feel a lot more comfortable if we had a couple of females on this panel.
I thank the gentleman for yield back. I might note that the Reverend Barry Lynn was not a female, and that was who you requested that would have been on this panel. With that, we go to the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Wahlberg, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I would yield for such time as needed.
Thank you. I just want to be very brief. Gandhi said, in matters of conscience, the law of the majority has no place. Rabbi, in this case where you have no faith-specific objections to what is in HHS, isn't that essentially why you're here, that